And both in your movies, people are always very ambiguous about his own identity, the fictional world and the true world. Why this kind of things attract you so much? I mean, it's become your major subject to. It's from a kind of philosophical thinking of.
My favorite types of films have always somehow related to the thriller genre. I like that form of storytelling, and because the camera pretends to be objective,
yes,
but it's not. You know, it's very subjective, particularly if you choose to use it in that way. And so, the great masters of suspense, like Hitchcock and Clouseau, they understood how to manipulate and how to align an audience's perceptions with one character or another, with their sympathies going to one character or another. And I think that stories in which you can't take identity for granted, even the identity of the narrator, who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, you know, it's a fun thing to play with.
In the past, you always imagine the future, or imagine the maybe not very concrete things, concrete situation. But now you're facing the very concrete historical place and event. So, I mean, the two imagination are very different for you, or similar? I mean, imagine the future.
I found it creatively. I found it invigorating because the key difference is that the world of the film, which is something you're normally, the world of the film is something in which, as a writer, I'm normally engaged in constructing from the ground up, particularly in a film like Inception, for example, or Interstellar. You know, the script has to create the entire world of the film and the terms of it. That part of it was already done for me in Dunkirk. That exists, it's real. And so all I had to do was research it and read about it. And so my creative process was then different. I didn't have to build that, I had to explore it. Quite honestly, the feeling of presumptuousness about making a war film as somebody who's never been to war and would, I mean, it's my worst nightmare to imagine having to fight a war. I had the privilege, and my grandfather was in the Air Force and he died in World War II, and I took my children to go and visit his grave. He's buried in France, and when you look at the gravestones of the people who actually died in this, and you think, okay, we're going to make an entertainment, we're going to make a, you know, a cinematic telling of war, that's very daunting, and it's difficult to know how to go about that. And for me, the solution was to not look at Dunkirk as a war film, to look at it as a survival story. And that I felt confident of. I felt confident of being able to tell a suspenseful story about survival.
Could or should director be kind of philosopher? I mean, maybe your industry produce your own Michel Foucault, produce your own Nietzsche. Do you kind of see the parallel between them?
Well, I think for me, that would be too much of a, it would be too self-conscious to look at filmmaking that way. One of the pleasures of talking about the film...
But you are very self-conscious.
Well, not at different stages. So you become very self-conscious when you're talking about the film you've made, because you're being asked, you know. For me, I like to really stay focused on the story and the themes of the film. I like to try and do that instinctively rather than self-consciously. And I sort of trust that the way in which I know how to make a film technically, that if there are things that are interesting to me philosophically, that they'll sort of somehow they'll be there. So for example, with Dunkirk, we've tried to make a very intense film that, and that was really the ambition. And so the film's attitude to war, therefore, for me, had to be not self-conscious. I didn't want to make a film that was an anti-war film or a pro-war film or anything. I wanted to make a film that presented my point of view on it and enjoy that.
So from the
sounds a little self-indulgent.
Yeah. Do you worry about maybe the genre, maybe the big production, maybe stifling your creativity? I mean, from following Insomnia, the different parts. Do you worry about it? Or
I don't. I mean, I have worried about it in the past in the case of this film, I very much chose to not worry about it. I very much chose to just say this is a huge film that for a British person particularly, it's a necessary film to be made. Somebody's going to make it. I want to be the person to make it. And so I'm a responsible filmmaker, and I try and, we made the film efficiently. We made it for a good price for the studio and everything. That was our way of kind of dealing with the practicalities. But beyond that, I did not worry too much about the scale. I just said, you know what, we're just going to make the film right, and we need planes, and we need ships, and we need thousands of people, and we're just going to make this film. And I think that was important to do, because the rational part of my brain, the sort of, the businessman, if you like.
The most flawed part of yourself.
I don't want to go there. I drink too much tea.
From the first idea of the movie until the finish, the whole thing, the whole process, what's the weakest part of in the whole process yourself?
The weakest part?
Weakest, yeah.
Gosh. That's a difficult thing to answer, because the way the job of director works is what I like about it is you're not responsible for any one thing. And so your responsibilities are spread, you get to dabble. You do a bit of everything. And so for me, it's not really about weaknesses and strengths, it's about an overall, I suppose, an overall mediocrity. It's like I have to be pretty good and kind of know quite a bit about a lot of different things. And so that's kind of fun. You don't have to be, you have experts around you. I have a fantastic director of photography, I have a fantastic designer, I have a fantastic editor and everything. And so I'm really just there to sort of, try and give them focus or try and inspire them to do their best work. And I think that's one of the reasons I really like the job of director. So I'm not the member of the team who has to have a specific strength, a specific weakness. I sort of need to be pretty good at a bunch of different things and kind of just keep
it. Must be Fox. Is there some kind of limitation you hated, you want to overcome it?
You feel very much when you're writing, you feel the limitations of your ability. Writing, I think, more than any other aspect of filmmaking, is the one where you have a notion, you have an idea underlying, and then you're confronted with the absolute difficulty of executing that. It's very, very tough.
Are there some writers inspire you a lot?
I'm always drawn to, the writer I always point to is Borges, the Argentinian writer.
Borges,
stories.
My favorite.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Also about kind of inception.
Very much.
Yeah. Return to a movie director. You are inspired by Ridley Scott, and this compare you today's achievement with him. So how do you think about your innovation with him?
How am I doing relative to that guy? I mean, geez, not for me to say. I think that, interestingly, the thing about Ridley Scott for me that captured my imagination as a teenager and has always stuck with me is his incredible ability to create worlds, his fascination with the visual side of filmmaking and ability to do that. And so when I started making my films, I think I pushed in a very different direction. And so my films have been more about narrative, I think, more about writing in a way. And it's almost that thing of the people you admire so much, you sort of need to do something different in a different way.
Yeah, and today's you are viewed as the representative for today's Hollywood. And how do you think about the tradition of Hollywood? I mean, from the John Ford, from the Coppola until James Cameron until you. I mean, you're part of tradition, or how do you define the tradition? And do you contribute something different in the tradition?
Well, I think it comes back to everybody here wanting me to talk about judge myself. Well, no, it's very tough. What I feel a responsibility to do, what I'm trying to do, is add something to that development or that evolution. But I would be lying if I said I knew what it was that I could or had done. I've been very gratified by some of the responses to Dunkirk, where people have felt that it is different, or that it adds something a little bit different to you know, what, you know, a summer blockbuster from a Hollywood studio can be, you know, whatever. The thing I've tried to do was I played a very big part in you know, the growth of or the dominance, I would say, of superhero films, you know, franchise properties and everything, and you know, that was an incredibly important thing in my career. I've always tried to balance that side of my filmmaking with original films and bring things that aren't familiar to an audience. But it's difficult. I mean, in television, everyone always talks about how great TV is today and how amazing it is and how much better it is. But I think films, we have the opposite. You look at it and you say, well, if this film doesn't have some unique point of view to it, if it doesn't have a strong point of view, it's not going to be interesting to people of today.